Hello fellow Weekly Festivals members, Renee Lupin here. I'm sorry for being late this week. I've been very slack because, the usual excuses. I'm incredibly tired, I'm incredibly sore. Okay. So this week's discussion topic, we are talking about the Harry Potter effect, and by that I mean books that you have read and authors you've come into contact with as a direct or indirect result of having read the Harry Potter series. And I'm very proud of this topic because it was my suggestion. So, I'm gonna try and talk as quickly as I can. Okay, so essentially, to put it in the most basic summary I could, Harry Potter really got me back into reading fantasy novels, and to a certain extent, I guess that sparred off into the kind of subgenres of paranormal romance and the different fantasy sections you can get within YA, of course. So that essentially Harry Potter could explain an awful lot of these titles. So, just saying. But certainly books that I know I read as a direct result would have been Isabel Carmody's Albert Newton Chronicles, and I can remember this because I had been a fan of the Harry books for about a year, and I had only just turned 15, and my friend turned to me and said, "You've got to read these books, you're going to love them, we'll be able to talk about them in the same way we talk about Harry. It's a very different feel, but I think you'll really like them because I love them and I would love to discuss them with you, so please read them." So I did, and of course I loved them. And it also turned me on to Isabel Carmody as a writer as well, and it got me into, back into high fantasy that was, I guess the age bracket for it was a little higher. But, it certainly had the same effect. My interest was maintained throughout, and I was having really emotional responses. I was loving certain characters, all this kind of stuff. So, other Isabel Carmody work I've also picked up on, her Legend Song trilogy and stuff. So, got me reading Isabel Carmody. One of the more obvious ones, I started reading his Dark Materials trilogy, especially because I became really geeky, because it's what I tend to do. As I said, I started to really like fantasy, but I also, not just reading it, but studying it as a genre of writing and the authors and the history of writing fantasy and stuff, which I'll explain in a second. But I was reading lots of articles and magazines all about fantasy in general and its popularity and how it was moving up through children and teenage readers through their books, and gaining lots of notoriety and critical acclaim. And one of the things that was really going on at the time was that in 2001, of course, this book here, the final book, The Amber Spyglass, won the Whitebread Book of the Year. And it was a huge thing. It's like, it's a children's book and it won this big award. Say what? So, that made a lot of buzz in the book world. So I remember thinking, I'm going to read that series. So I did. And of course I really liked it. And then here's another obvious one that you'll probably all roll your eyes at. But of course I knew about Lord of the Rings. But obviously I felt once I'd entered into the Harry world, this series rather deserved me to give it some attention. And this was just before the films were getting released. So I thought, you know what, damn you, I'm going to read ya. So I went out and got myself some Tolkien. I do, out of all of these, I'm going to say it right now, The Hobbit's my favourite, and I've read this one 3 times. I'm probably never going to reread these, because, oh my goodness, but The Hobbit was certainly, I really enjoyed The Hobbit. So I'm glad I read those. And then finally, probably the nerdiest thing of all that I really got into because of Harry was that, like I said, I was reading books about fantasy, articles about fantasy, as a genre to write and study, and I really got into it on an academic level. So I was getting out, Bruno Bettelheim's, people will know what I'm talking about if you've studied any of this kind of thing, but, The Meaning of Fairy Tales, I think was what it was called, but I'm probably wrong. And I also read Joseph Campbell's The Hero with 1,000 Faces, and lots of different scholastic texts that I was finding really enjoyable and fun. So it got me into grabbing traditional fairy tales, so I got the Grimms and stuff. It got me grabbing traditional myths, so here I have me some Ovid. And it got me reading fairy tale retellings as well, which of course I'm a huge fan of now. So yeah, I just really got my nerd on and started to embrace it in all different forms. So not just reading the standard fiction that was really popular at the time, but trying to go back and find other things that I liked. Like as a result, I went through to uni and wanted to do fantasy courses, so I've read like Ursula Le Guin and Dune and that kind of thing, and went on and studied myth and fairy tale at uni as well. So it's just, yeah, it opened lots of doors into where I read, but also I guess how I was reading it as well. I just became suddenly nowhere near as self-conscious about loving fantastical things in my reading, and realised that, to be perfectly honest, a narrative is just better if it's fantasy, because you're still able to incorporate everything that you would seek in a novel, and it can still be every bit as serious as a realistic fiction, but for some reason, I don't know, it gets heightened obviously because the world is different and outside of the norm, so everything's sort of amped up a bit, and I just think that works fantastically. Oh, fantastically! So really, thank you, Harry and Joe Rowling, because really you've led me to all of this stuff, and it's brilliant, and I'm very grateful. So yeah, that's my little chitty chat. We'll go now, but I'll see you all soon, and hope everybody's doing well. Goodbye!